Welcome to the Bayesian Conspiracy. I'm Iniash Brodsky.
I'm Steven Zuber, and today we have a guest. You want to introduce yourself?
I'm Shelley.
Hello there, Shelley. Shelley is here with us because she thinks that everyone should lie all the time.
Not a fair characterization, and I think I probably disagree with Shelley more than you do. So what are we actually talking about? Do you want to introduce it with your... we're going to talk about the topic of lying in general, I think.
Yeah, and I guess it's relevant to the rationalist community in that I think there's maybe slightly stronger norms against lying among rationalists as opposed to general society.
There definitely seems to be at least the ideal that we tell the truth as much as possible, even to the point of making people uncomfortable, which I don't think that everyone holds to that, but it's nice to have that as an ideal, right?
Well, not that everyone be uncomfortable. I think the idea is that so people are uncomfortable with honesty. Right. So the idea is, I think, in my mind, to overcome that and to make it to where you can actually engage with somebody directly and honestly and save yourselves a bunch of time and drama, right?
Yes.
Or even, I guess if you're going to say it like in rationalist terms, minimize communication time and minimize message length by just getting straight to the point.
Right. But a lot of people seem to need that. Like it's a lubricant to because otherwise, if you're just being all honest at each other, there's friction out in the real world, it seems. By the real world, I mean the crazy world where all the insane people are.
Yeah, avoiding just straight to the point honesty does have some perks.
So what are these perks?
Just in general, like if you want to get someone to do things that are benefit you that don't necessarily benefit them.
That seems like a bad thing to do. Like in just, I mean, I'm using bad in like the moral sense here, that I would feel bad trying to get someone to do things to benefit me that hurts them.
I agree. I'm wondering, is there a defensible example of that? Or are you just okay saying...
And do you want to keep the money that you have right now? Because that would benefit you, but if you give it to me, that would benefit me.
So the cases really are just like sociopathic self-interest. No, I thought that would be a straw man, but like, is that really what you're like defending here?
No.
Okay, good. Yeah. So what's the not sociopathic version of defending this?
Obviously, like people's interests don't always completely align. And sometimes someone may, for instance, want to kill your friend and they ask you, where's your friend hiding? And instead of saying the truthful answer, friend's in the basement, you say, she's in the next town over. I'm totally ripping off Slate Star Codex's example right now.
Oh, damn. If there's a Slate Star example, he's probably thought of my comeback, which is I tell the killer, fuck you. That's where my friend is, right?
Well, I mean, but maybe he has an axe and he looks very ready to use it on you.
That's why I'm sort of a fan of like home defense, but just for the occasional axe-wielding psychopath.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess, so that is one of like the standard examples. In fact, I think we talked about this when we talked about Kant way back when.
Yeah.
And that the post is actually about that.
You can't reason with deontology or something? Yeah.
No, you can't dismiss
you can't ignore universalizability.
That's right.
Yeah.
I like the idea of general rules in some contexts, but like this is one of those things where, Kant does just bite the bullet and say, yep, you just tell him the truth. I've got him here. Rather than, so for me, the comeback is if you're not comfortable just telling them to fuck off, and if you don't want to lie, your alternative is to engage with them. If they're an axe-wielding psychopath, if they're not they've kind of given up and this could be a circumstance where I'd advocate lying. I guess I wouldn't advocate lying up until you've reached the point where the potential for honest communication is broken down, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're dealing with a psycho who's there to kill you or your friends, that might be a point, right? But at some point, that person's going to get somewhere where someone's going to have to shut them down physically. The police are going to show up and arrest them or whatever it is, right? Or the townspeople get together and strip that axe away from them or something.
I think that once you have that much of a fundamental conflict of values, then there's going to be, you're going to have to resort to violence in some sort, and I guess verbal violence in that case would be better than physical violence, at least until you can get someone who's better at physical violence to come, like the cops. But I still, in general, think it is a thing that would be good to avoid. Like, I don't like that example specifically because everyone can agree, yes, in that case, you do lie to people. Because this is a case where you're going to come into violent conflict anyway, and if you know you're going to be fighting someone, you might as well go ahead and lie to them. But I meant more like in like general life situations. So I find myself, I have sort of a avoidance of conflict thing going where I will occasionally not lie per se, but hold back the truth. Fine, fuck it. I lie sometimes to avoid conflict with other people because I'm like, I'd rather not argue with you. We can just let this go. And I mean, that has led to a few unfortunate circumstances in my life where afterwards I was like, I really wish I just would have been honest up front.
Yeah. My position, despite being on a podcast talking about defending lying, is that lying is usually not a good idea. And it's for the obvious reasons that children are taught why not to lie. The people won't believe you anymore. And it's really difficult to keep track of all the web of other lies that will depend on your first lie. And it's effortful to lie. And like, as you just described, you end up regretting lies when you may be caught.
For such a good purpose, though. I just want to not fight, man.
Yeah.
So Shelley, those are kind of my exact thoughts too. And the other thing I don't like about the axe wielding example is that people are way too quick to generalize from that and say, aha, so you admit it's okay to lie. So like, therefore it's okay to like lie to your friend about why you're breaking plans, or, you know, lie to your spouse about where you were all night or something like that. Right. And like I said, I think once you've reached the point where you're prepared to engage in violence, then lying to them, you're past the point of ever trying to have an honest relationship with the person. But that doesn't apply to the overwhelming majority of lies people tell. You know, we're not often lying to axe-wielding murderers. We're lying to our friends and family for like stupid, in what we'll often acknowledge ourselves are stupid reasons. You know?
Well, I did look up some research on lying, and unfortunately it was a survey where people self-report. So I'd, take that with a grain of salt. But the surveys seem to show that when people self-report how much they lie, about 60% of people say that they don't really lie very much at all. And then
60% of people are liars then.
Perhaps so. And the people who did report lying reported several lies, I guess. So it's like a few people are big liars, and while most people don't lie that much, I think, was the results of the survey.
And I wonder what like that much meant in that context. I mean, so there's all kinds of cool stuff about, again, you have to go by self-report unless you're going to just stalk people and, fact check everything they say or something. But
well, no, there are other studies that try to determine lying in other methods.
Oh, well, I'd be curious to learn about those too. I guess I was going to say like there are things where apparently people who rate them, I guess maybe these are the same people who would say I'm dishonest, who would check, I'm dishonest sometimes on whatever these surveys are. People in similar circumstances, not knowing exactly what you're talking about, but those similar people will assume that other people are dishonest with them as well.
Oh my God.
And so
I have noticed the hell out of that. I have noticed that if someone believes the world is out to get them and basically everyone is evil and trying to screw over everyone else and take all the advantage they can for themselves, those are the exact same people that do that sort of thing all the time.
Yeah.
It seems to me they're basically just generalizing from their own experience in life. And so I no longer trust people who don't trust others, because it means you're probably a lying douchebag. Which is unfortunate, because you can't trust people all the time either, So it makes me feel like I am punishing people for being realistic about the fact that you can't always trust everyone. But whenever I see someone just every single thing, yep, that's how they get you. So I'm like, oh God.
Well, it may be the kind of heuristic that applies more to the extremes, right? Like people who, as you say, are always thinking that way are probably more, it's probably more conform to that rule.
People who can't even get free guacamole at a restaurant without saying, there's a scam involved.
So Shelley, what the agreement, or at least the implicit agreement, was that you're going to defend lying for us. Or are we all on the same page?
No, I think. So getting back to the defending lying, I guess the thing that I wanted Shelley on is because in the rationalist community it is often sort of a norm to go to the extreme of being always honest to the point of like painful transparency, honesty all the time, and you think that is not necessarily a good thing all the time.
Yeah, first of all, I guess maybe we should break down like all the different categories and complexities of deception because there is explicit lying and then there is not technically lying.
Not technically lying is the one that annoys me the most. Because Harry did that a lot from the Harry Potter and Methods of Rationality, where he would say things that were technically true, but in a way where he knew the person was drawing the false conclusion. And I'm like, if you're saying something in a way that makes someone get wrong information about the world, you're lying to them. Even if, a genie would say, yes, those words are technically the truth.
That's the definition I like too. Is sort of like when you're intentionally trying to communicate something to get your recipients to have a belief that isn't true.
Yeah.
So like technically true. There's the fun example. Like I go take a tour at the White House and I call Cory Gardner, our state representative, and I say, "This is Steven Zuber. I'm calling from the White House. I'd like to talk to the Cory Gardner." So what does that communicate? That sounds like I'm calling from the White House and I'm an important person, but I'm just calling from proximity to the White House. Right. So like but that statement is calculated to deliver that obviously false message, right?
Yeah.
Where like I know they're going to believe the wrong thing. So that to me that's a lie, right? But I don't feel like if so like what's the standard thing people don't like talking about, like how much money they have. So if someone asks me, Stephen, how much money do you have? I can say, I don't want to tell you.
Yeah.
That's the honest answer. Yeah. Not here's my exact bank balance, right?
It is really weird dodging around those sorts of things because I don't really care if people know how much money I have or how much I make. I don't consider money a very good indication of moral worth, but in society, there's this very strict, in our society anyway, there's this norm. There's this norm of not telling anyone how much you make or how much you have. And so oftentimes I'm like dancing around saying these numbers when I'm like, God, I really wish I could just blurt this out because who gives a fuck, But you don't want to be seen as the asshole who has no idea about social conventions.
I share that belief with you about money. I chose that because it's a topical example. I mean, what's another one that people find, uncomfortable to talk about? That was the first thing that came to mind, but the money thing's pretty ubiquitous, but I'm in your boat there.
I believe you were just earlier talking about whenever someone says, how are you? You're just supposed to say fine.
Yeah.
I think that might be a mistake on my part because when people say, how are you? I almost always answer honestly, just on reflex. And I mean, I don't go into the too much information zone like, oh man, this morning I woke up with just diarrhea coming out of my ass. But I'll be like, I've been better.
Yeah, I think I kind of do that as well. Because my tendency is to try and be at least technically honest when speaking to people, especially when answering a direct question.
Yeah. Especially if it's something as low stakes as how are you? Like, I don't know why I would lie about that.
And to be clear, I don't think I would lie about that either. I think what I was getting at is there's a difference between
like the socially accepted answer is fine.
Well, I mean, there's also like the question, but this involves a level of mind reading that I don't usually like to get into, but often, like if your boss comes around your desk and says, "Hey, how are you doing today?" You don't say, "Oh man, trouble at home. Here's all my list of problems." You don't list why everything isn't great. You and I might say, it's okay, pretty okay day. But there are people who would say, "Ross isn't really asking how are you." Mm-hmm. They're asking, they're saying hello.
Generic greeting.
Right. So, I mean, if you really believe that, you can reply with whatever you want. And, you just, if you actually think, yes, they're not asking about me, they're saying hi or whatever, then you can give whatever the, return greeting is. But
you can also give use a statement that expresses greeting, but is also in its explicit content accurate as well.
I always say not too bad.
Yeah.
I mean, because that's technically true. It could be worse,
Yeah. You don't have leprosy.
So, I mean, yeah, other than, like I said, like other examples of lying than like sociopathic self-interest, well, you have money that I would like, so I'm going to convince you of things in order to give, to convince you to give me your money. Mm-hmm. Man, I struggled through that sentence. Or, I'm going to lie about a bunch of things to get you to sleep with me or something. Those typically, I think, are not regarded as favorable by anybody. Other than psychopaths or, the people who are like that. So, I mean, is there a level of lying that anyone here is okay with, or are we all just going to sit here and...
I mean, other than the extreme examples that you agreed were okay?
Well, what did I agree to exactly?
Well, I think you talked about, like, if physical violence is...
Oh, yeah. Once the possibility for, like, amicable communication is gone, then yeah. if you're in a position where you're ready to hurt or kill somebody, you're in a position where it's okay to lie to them too.
Right.
So
I think one level of lying that I engage in myself and I think is probably acceptable is when someone puts you in a position where you basically have to lie to them. And I think we were just talking about this a little earlier. What was the question you get asked when you go into a job interview? Like, why do you want to work here or something?
Exactly. Like,
Yeah.
what made you pick us?
The answer is always because you're going to give me money.
Right.
Yeah.
Or because, out of the 250 places I applied to, you're one of the 3 places to call me back. Right. So, like,
But how do they not know? They obviously know that the correct answer is because you need to pay your fucking rent. And they're willing to give you money for it, and yet they still ask the damn question anyway. So they deserve to get a stupid lie back, because what are you going to do? Be the one guy who tells them the truth?
God, I think that you might have caught me in a corner there, because so this might be an example of one of those circumstances where it's not actually an honest engagement of communication.
There was
it's really it's just like a personality test. We want to ask you a generic question, see if you can answer in a roughly human fashion.
Well, but Stephen, did you lie to that question?
So I told Inyash, I interviewed at a company that's like 8 people last week. And they asked me, what attracted you to this company? And what attracted me? You guys wanted to interview with me. That's what attracted me the most. But so obviously I can't say that. So what I did say is like, well, I love the idea of, being responsible for a product that I actually built, not being one of like 40 other developers who worked on something. I like being able to take ownership of my stuff. And, I find that level of direct involvement with the product, desirable or something like that.
Beautiful answer.
And I told Inyash, like, I don't even know if that's true. And looking at myself, I have no idea if I believe that or not. But what I did there was I looked for an answer. What do they want to hear? Mm-hmm. And so I don't know. I guess that counts as a lie. But I'm not sure if they know what the truth is. So like they're not looking for the truth. They're looking for, and I'm not sure if I'm trying to bullshit myself to make myself okay with this lie. I'm not convinced that they would have been happy with, I'm ready to do pretty much anything you guys are willing to pay me for. Like that's what made me interested. Right?
I sometimes kind of wonder what would happen if you were to answer truthfully on those sorts of things.
You wouldn't get called back.
You don't think?
I think the key is they want you to be professional enough to do your job and human enough to work with, right?
Okay. And
if you're that level of radical honest, you're not human enough that they'll think you'll be comfortable enough working in an environment.
I think there are other motivations behind asking that question, which could also help you to craft an answer that is less of a lie. For instance, if I was going to ask that question to someone that I wanted to hire, I would want to know if they had researched like my company and what they actually thought, like what is their opinion about the way we do things, or do you even know the way we do things?
Yeah, you bet. And those are other good answers too. And I think the thing is about the answer that I gave in this example, I think I actually do believe that. Mm-hmm. I happen to also like other things about like working like as a cog in a machine where like I'm one of like 40 people. I think I actually honestly like that too.
Yeah.
So they're not asking me, why would you pick us over everybody else? They're asking me, why would you pick us in general? I'm like, oh, well, these are the reasons. I'm not going to list all the reasons why I wouldn't pick you guys. I'll list all the reasons why I would. I think that's an honest answer.
I prefer working for a large company because you can kind of blend in the background and get lost in the machine, right?
that may not be the best answer.
Yeah, I am not passionate about accounting. I'm here to collect my paycheck, and I hope I don't draw attention.
No one will notice if I spend 10 hours a week on Reddit. So, yeah. But, I mean, the real answer, I guess this is sort of a field, but the general thing is that you can give answers that are honest, but not like the complete package, right? Mm-hmm. Like you said, your boss comes around and asks how you are. You don't describe your morning bowel movement and, your gastrointestinal distress on the drive to work or something,
maybe
right?
You don't.
So, you give them an answer that's, some of it. But so I think one of the kickbacks I get, which I'm surprised that there's a lot of kickback. There's not a lot, but there's some kickback to like talking about, yes, I'm a big fan of honesty. I think that people lie way more often than they should. And the average person could go their entire life without lying and their lives would be better. And so would the people that they live with and interact with. But people, are like, that's not true. What about all these? They'll say, well, they'll think that the commitment to honesty means that you have to like be always forthcoming with everything. And that's not true either. Like I said, with the axe murder example, where's your friend? You don't have to answer. The answer isn't, they're in the basement. The answer is screw off or screw you, right? Or fuck off, whatever it is. Yeah. Or, whatever personal information someone asks you. I can't think of a good question. Your boss asks you, or if you're interviewing again, I'm thinking interviews on my mind. How much did you make at your last job? Oh, I'm not really, I guess I'm not really comfortable saying it's the same thing as saying I don't want this job. So I'm not really sure what you're supposed to do there. But, so like, because if you say too little, they're going to offer you whatever you made at your last job, and you want to make more. So, what is another question?
In all my personal interactions, I've never. So I felt really weird doing this before when people would ask me probing questions. I felt like I always had to answer. And if it was something I wasn't comfortable telling the true answer about, I would just kind of not say the truth. but by not saying the truth, I mean I would lie. This was back in the day. But I have found that every single time nowadays when I just say, I'm not really comfortable with that, people are like, oh, okay. And they just don't care. It seems like after a day, they don't even remember that they asked that. I'm like, this is awesome.
Right. And that's awkward your first couple of times.
Yeah.
And then you realize that like, and people aren't going to lose their mind if you tell them, I don't want to answer that, or I'm not comfortable, or whatever.
Although I understand how there might be an internal resistance to saying that kind of thing, because there are all these signaling implications of, saying, I don't want to tell you.
Yeah. It feels a lot like defecting in the conversation game.
Yeah, but I mean, you're also implicitly saying, like, we're not close enough for me to tell you that, or something. That's or true. That there's a really huge secret, which I'm not going to tell you.
Right. So I may have killed one man.
Secret's another thing that comes up in my life. So I've kind of made like the commitment to honesty, I don't know, a few years ago. Mm-hmm. And everyone's like committed to being honest, but like really about, trying to never lie.
Yeah.
So whatever family drama or friendship drama where they're like, oh, you can't tell so-and-so, but this. God, yeah. And then, so people know me enough by now, for the most part, that they can't say, they won't try and tell me something and be like, oh, but you have to lie if you're asked about this, because they know I won't. Okay. There are times where, if someone says, I can't think of an example, don't tell this person that I can't think of a good example, whatever, I quit my job or something. For whatever reason, I don't want them to know. Mm-hmm. And then that person asks me, I can just say, I guess what would I say in that situation? If I'm asked to, like, for the most part, these things don't come up. So like, you're not really called upon to like lie. But if you are, you can just say, you know what? Because in a question that's like binary like that, you're basically giving them the answer by not answering it. Yeah. So I think in those situations, people that I know by now, for the most part, don't really want me to keep those kinds of secrets. And it's not like, again, I'll go tell people, but I would say maybe like, I was asked not to tell you.
Okay.
So.
Well, how about the not technically a lie option, which is to say, I couldn't say.
Oh. I couldn't say sounds like I don't know, but I do know.
Right.
That's one of those things where it's like, you could say, but you won't. So like you are lying. But I guess I'm bad at generating examples. So if anyone has one, I could be happy to play along. But I'm struggling to think of a good example myself. Or
you could. Sometimes you can just distract people in a way. You can say like, this is the kind of question that you ought to ask a person personally, and maybe you're out of line for asking. You kind of turn it back on them.
Yeah.
I've done that before too. I don't think there's even where I do this in situations where I'm not even privy to like special information, but they could be like, oh my God, what do you think about like this relationship drama? I'm like, who'd be a great person to ask about that? Your relationship partner. Even if I knew what they would say, like say if we'd even have talked about it, I will say, who's the best person? The person that you're talking about. That's who you should be talking to.
Yeah.
And that's also the truth, right?
Yeah.
That is the best person to be talking to, not me. So, all right. Sorry, I got us distracted again. Shelley, what are non-psychopath examples of defensible lying?
I kind of want to go back to what you said about the possibility of violence. Like, I think that there are more situations where violence is a threat than you may consider. It's not just where you're talking to an individual and that individual is going to beat you up. For instance, there are situations in which if you admitted that you had suicidal thoughts, you would be put on a psych hold, or police would come and take you away for your own good. And I think that it may be reasonable for a person to, even if asked directly, like, do you have any suicidal thoughts, to say no. Because there are a number of people who constantly have suicidal thoughts, but at the same time are not suicidal.
Yeah. I guess define suicidal thoughts. But I mean, so, and I'm not being flippant, but that's what I would say.
Not at immediate risk.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So, I mean, that's what I'd say to my psychiatrist or my psychologist. If I was talking with one, I would say, by my own honest best appraisal, I'm not an immediate risk for self-harm. And even if I'm having,
and if that person could be
invasive
trusted to accept that, then
I would hope that I would trust but that's true. If you feel like you can't trust the person you're talking with, or like,
yeah, and that happens with in a lot of situations, especially, I don't know, teenagers living at home with parents who would send them off to something that the parents think is good for them, but could be devastating to them.
One of those ex-gay camps or
Yeah,
something.
exactly.
that's true. And I do want to emphasize that I don't think these cover the vast majority of lies that people tell. I think for the most part, people are telling what they consider to be like little white lies. You know, oh yeah, I can't make it to dinner party because I'm stuck 60 miles away in traffic, when in fact they're at home and they just don't want to go.
I guess what you're saying, it's kind of a privilege to be able to tell the truth sometimes.
And yeah, it is.
Well,
Because if you're living in a situation where someone has a lot of control over your life, over what resources you have access to, even if you do hold certain opinions or values, you may have to lie about what they actually are, or they'll take those away.
And the one thing that these all have in common, and the third one that I just thought of, and the fourth one that I thought of, it's like other people you might lie to in similar examples are like the police or your boss about something or other, right? So like, but the thing these all have in common is that the person you're lying to has a disproportionate, compared to your power over them, they have more power over you than you do over them.
Yeah.
And so if the police pulls you over and asks, do you have any drugs in the car?
Right.
And if you think they'll believe me if I say no, but if I say yes, I'm definitely going to jail, you'll say no. Yeah. But I mean, that's just one of the bummers of having bad laws, right? That it puts otherwise good people, it forces otherwise good people to be dishonest. In the example of talking to, like, if you're talking to your parents and you're afraid that they're going to do bad things to you, you're right. That is a little dialed down from like being at risk of, literally getting killed with an axe or something, but that's at the risk of coming to self.
Well, it's interesting. What if they
your
were
life
just what if they would just withdraw college funding from you? Because that's certainly not violent necessarily. It's not life threatening. It's people could argue, well, it's their money. If they don't want to give you their money to send you off to college, then they don't have to, right? And I mean, I basically kind of agree with that, but on the other hand, that's
So here,
it feels like there's almost a social contract that if you have kids and you have enough money to send them to college and they can do well in college, that you should, right?
So the distinction here, we're running with the example of like where you have parents who aren't okay with a child being gay.
Yeah.
And so if they ask you for whatever reason, point blank, are you gay? And because if you say yes, I'm not going to pay for your college, then you'll say, well, of course not then. So like, I
Not
think
even necessarily gay. If you have really religious parents, they're like, are you an aspiring rationalist? And you're like, no, ma'am. Right. I believe in the big Jeezy.
that's right. So I think, I mean, in those circumstances, you're kind of saying, well, would I want to, all right, so I've got a few thoughts, if you don't mind me rambling for a second.
Go for it.
So one, you're okay throwing an honest relationship out the window for whatever payoff you're going to get for lying to them. In this
Yeah.
case, you're like, you know what? I'm okay not being open with my parents if it means getting free college.
Right. Basically using them for their college money.
But at the same time, you're like, well, I don't want to have a relationship with people who, don't like non-believers or gay people or whatever my parents don't like, right?
Yeah.
And so if you're okay with like, if it's okay to take advantage of bad people, then you can just do whatever you want to them. So like that's, or at least in the context of, manipulating them through deceit.
Right.
I don't know if I necessarily buy that whole chain. There's also the possibility too.
I don't think it's necessarily okay to take advantage of bad people.
I don't think so either, but that might be what someone would think if they're okay lying to them in order to keep their college tuition, right? But I mean, then consider too that there's a breakdown of what could be a very fruitful and important development in the conversation, right? Like you might just believe your parents would, disown you if they learned you were gay, when in fact they might.
They might have known all along.
Or they might have known all along. They might be super supportive. Now, granted, you might have a really good idea, and you're not going to take a 5% chance that somehow they've been hiding their super niceness about this subject their entire lives.
Right.
But I guess it depends what kind of relationship you want to have with them. And again, if your parents are closed-minded bigots against whatever you are, hypothetically,
And it's
they
even
might not be the
possible
kind of
that
people you
they've
want to have.
known all along, but they are just okay with keeping everything hidden.
Yeah.
And as soon as you come out, they're like, well, fuck you, you broke the contract.
And I mean, so like that depends. Like if they're those kind of people, there might be the kind of people you're okay not having a real relationship with.
Yeah.
But I think mainly
I think
I'm
you'd be-
against lying when there's a chance for a real relationship.
It feels like a shitty thing to tell someone that you should throw away your future for honesty, but it feels shitty to tell someone that you should take money from people you don't like just because you have moral disagreements with them, right? If it's their money, then it's their choice whether they spend it on sending you to college or not. But that's also easy for me to say, seeing as I am, not in the college going to age range. This is not a concern for me, I guess.
Yeah, but I mean, like lying to your boss about something that they might find objectionable. I'm not really sure when, like, laws are pretty good in the United States anyway about keeping those kind of conversations illegal. So like I do occasionally see job listings where they're like, and we want applicants with good Christian values, and even straight up ones like we want Christians.
Okay.
I think those must be for private organizations, not for public companies, because you're not supposed to be able to do that. So if your employer asks, in fact, there's actually a reputable, I'm not sure if this is a chain or if it's one place, but there's a nursing home in my hometown that has some, like, they're a very good place, well funded, nicely staffed, and well equipped. But one of the things they care about is they want to make sure that in their list of like value statements, they have like good Christian values or something like that. And it's like the only off-putting thing about them is that, like, oh, they kind of want you to be religious, but they might be able to ask you. In fact, I know somebody did interview with them. They had asked, do you feel like you personally line up with our value statements? Mm-hmm. And in that implicitly is, are you a good Christian person? Okay. But it's not explicit. Yeah. And so you could say, yeah, I feel like I agree.
I have an interesting personal thing that is exactly that.
Awesome.
There's a lot of markets out there for publishing genre fiction. And for the most part, they don't care who you are. They're like, send us the story. If it's a good story, we'll pay you money and we'll publish it. But there's a few that are like, and check this box if you are one of these minorities. And I check the box for sexual minority and for religious minority because I am one of the most hated religious minorities in the country. According to every survey, at least up to a few years ago, we're more hated than Muslims, atheists. And under sexual minority, yes, I would say that the polyamory people generally get a lot of flack from the monogamous out there. Like, oh, you're living this immoral lifestyle and how could you? And so, yeah, I always check those. But I know what they're actually asking is, are you Muslim or gay?
Right.
And I'm like, no, I'm not those things, but screw you.
But by the word of your question, I'm answering honestly.
Yeah.
Right.
And if you are I feel like I am being honest, because if you are part of a minority that gets a lot of shit from the the majority of the culture, I think it counts, right? Am I wrong about that?
Well, I guess it depends on the exact wording of the question, though. But religious minority, I think atheism is completely in that category. I don't think that you're really fudging on that one.
Okay.
I think a lot of people would draw contention with you calling it a religious anything, but for the intents and purposes of like getting all the legal benefits, sure. Or the legal, benefits, sure.
I always considered atheism to be basically a religion.
I think people would disagree.
It is a religious alignment, I guess.
Yeah, religious alignment, I think.
I always use it's a religion in the same way that not collecting stamps is a hobby, or that baldness is a hairstyle.
Yeah, but it's not really, because
it's not a religion, but it's a religious alignment.
Yeah. It's not a religion. There's no strictures or anything, but there is. You've considered these things and you've come to the conclusion that it's bullshit and that the world is materialistic, which is still a philosophy that generally is confined to the religious domain, right?
I like Shelley's version of religious alignment more.
Well, that was Inuyasha's words.
Did you use alignment?
Yeah. I did. Yeah.
Oh, I heard you repeat it. Sorry. So I think alignment is different than like a religion, right? This is sort of an aside.
But no, the questions are extremely loosely worded to the point where they could mean almost anything. When yeah.
Yeah, fair enough.
I do not feel bad checking those, because if they actually were to ask something like, have you slept with a man? Then I would be no. But they're like, are you under this entire spectrum of but altered sexualities? I'm like, yes, I actually fall under several categories there. So
that's actually a good distinction. I know when I give blood, they'll ask, specifically, because in some places it might still be the case. It's been a few years, but they care if you're a gay male. They want to know if you've had sex with a man.
Yeah.
And they ask you explicitly.
Right. And I'm like, there's some men I'm attracted to. I've never had sex with any of them.
Well, no, Chris Hemsworth won't return my calls. So, no.
Damn it. I just have to become more popular.
So, there's at that point you'd be lying to say yes, right? So I guess there's a difference. I feel like we're getting a little sidetracked.
Right.
Sorry. Shelley, you want to bring us back on?
Oh, well, I did bring a few links and notes about the topic, so maybe I can bring those up. The revelation principle, it's has to do with game theory and economics, I suppose.
Tell us about this revelation principle.
So first I have to tell you what mechanism design is, which is even more complicated to talk about. People have described mechanism design as reverse game theory, in that you start with the outcome you want as a function of the elements that come into play. So you figure out what you want to do. For instance, an outcome might be you want the person who needs the resource more to get it, or something, to get more of it.
Okay.
Or so whatever outcome it is, so then you design a mechanism whereby the players can, within these restrictions of the mechanism, act in such a way that you'll get your outcome. And so the revelation principle is a fundamental principle in mechanism design. It says that if it is possible to create some mechanism according to certain restrictions, I guess, I don't know the exact thing, but anyway, you can, in theory, implement that same function in a mechanism where the players do not have to lie.
Okay, I wasn't sure I understood exactly what all this is. Can you summarize what this means?
Maybe I should just read the Wikipedia.
Or if you can bring it home with an example, that works too.
Are we talking about like when you're going to a car dealership and you're trying to negotiate with someone?
That could be an example.
That's always one of the things I hate about those sorts of interactions, that you both know that you're lying. He's giving you an artificially high price because he knows you're going to track him down. You're giving him an artificially low price because you know he's giving you a high price. And it's like,
right.
Why do we have to go through these hours of bullshitting each other when we could both just start with very reasonable actual prices?
Last time I went to a dealership.
The what?
Last time I went to a dealership, the guy came up to me, "Hey, how much would you like to spend on a car today?" And I said, "I would like to spend zero." And I gave him kind of like, a nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Like, I'm obviously kind of playing along, but I'm not going to play. Like, I'm looking to spend somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 grand. It's like, no, I'm not going to, like, if I can get what I want for 10, I want it for 10. Or if I can get it for 5, that's what I want. So like, but he asked how much I want. Oh, I'd like to get a free car. Like, that's the honest answer.
It is.
And that makes things tough because if everyone could just say exactly what they wanted and be honest about it, you could much more easily allocate the resources or do what needs to be done efficiently. But since everyone thinks that the other people, and for that matter, knows that the other people are going to be inflating theirs, you got to do it as well.
Sort of. It depends.
Isn't that what we got with our politics lately, it feels like?
Do we want to go there?
No, okay, fine. But it just seems like people are like, oh, we got to...
So I'll try and use this example from Wikipedia. The utilitarian function is roughly that whoever values it more gets the prize. Mm-hmm. And it talks about auctions and how people are incentivized to bid lower than they really would value it so that they possibly can get the item for a lower price. But second price auction is a different strategy than your typical auction. It's a sealed bid auction, and the highest bidder wins, but the price they have to pay is the second highest price that was bid.
That is really cool.
Yeah. So people are less incentivized to be deceptive about how much they really would pay.
Well, hold on. Wouldn't it be really easy then to just put down $1 billion and then whoever made the most reasonable offer, you'd actually just pay whatever they were going to pay?
Yeah.
So like you can guarantee that you would win for whatever like a reasonable price would be.
What if someone put down $1 billion minus $1?
That's
and
true.
Then you have to pay $1 billion minus $1.
Indeed.
I guess if you're the only person that you knew who was going to be a dick and not play by the spirit of the game.
No, so yeah, you can't just maximize it because everyone's going to maximize it, but there's always a chance that your bid is actually going to be the second highest, and then that's going to actually be the price.
Right. Well, then if your bid is the second highest, then you won't get what you want, but some other idiot is stuck paying $1 billion for, whatever thing you bid it on, right?
I hadn't heard it called that before, but I heard it that being proposed as one of the ways to solve the government contractor problem, where since in a lot of areas the governments are required to take the lowest bidder, companies will just give fake low bids. And then, oops, we ran over on cost. Oops, this take a month longer than we thought. And this is why everything goes over budget now, because you lie to get the contract. And someone proposed that the rule be changed to you have to take the second lowest bid, which, punishes the people who go artificially low.
Well, that's slightly different from
It is. But it reminded me of that.
Yeah.
It was a very cool concept.
So the revelation principle says that for any mechanism that actually accomplishes something, there if that mechanism involves deception, there's a different one that could also accomplish it that does not involve deception.
Okay. Does it say how to do that?
No.
No. Oh, okay.
So
And in some cases, like even if there's theoretically this other game you could be playing in which you don't have to lie, are you really going to be able to convince everyone to play that game instead of the game that we are playing?
So yeah, I guess maybe the difference, just running with the example given, is like where you're doing this second bid auction, but you're not telling anybody until the end, versus one where you tell them at the beginning. Is that?
Oh, well, that's a totally different game there.
Yeah. So I guess I'm not really sure. Let me ask this a different way. When you and I talked about this once, we talked about like just lying in general, and you were like, no, I think I can find some defensible cases for that. Or you came off speaking more in favor of it to the level where I was surprised. Why? What?
I'm not sure.
Was there some
that I
miscommunication
was-
between us, or?
It may have just been a reaction against the extreme honesty idea of rationality. I saw someone recently, I showed this to you earlier. I saw someone recently on a post from a kind of rationalist memer person, Rob Wiblin. Everyone here knows Rob Wiblin, right? No? Okay, anyways, he posted something, and a commenter replied that she was really annoyed by the fact that everyone has to pretend that honesty is this most important thing ever, and everyone has to be honest all the time because of her commitment to honesty, because that means people are lying about the fact that sometimes lying is the best thing to do in consequentialist terms.
I read what you're talking about, and she
Yeah.
conflated honesty with free speech. I think
Well, the original post was about free speech.
I know, but
Yeah.
I think she even said that for her the two are the same,
Okay.
and I think that they're different.
That honesty and free speech are different?
Yes.
Yeah, they're
One is the
different.
protection to say whatever you want without fear of getting thrown in jail or killed or hurt.
Mm-hmm.
The other one is being able to, or I guess being encouraged to, or whatever, is not deceiving somebody. Right.
Right.
So there's a difference.
Yeah, but I think she was annoyed that everyone is always saying you have to always tell the truth. There's no reason ever to lie. And she's saying that in itself is a lie.
Is she lying about that?
What's that?
I had to make that joke at least once. Like, so I mean, that's always my joke about somebody who defends lying. I'm like, are you lying right now?
I think it is actually fairly rare, even among rationalists, to say that there's absolutely no cases where it's good utility to lie.
I mean, there was the you can't dismiss universality. Was it universality? What fuck? I don't even.
Right, and even in that post, I think the ultimate conclusion that Scott ends up drawing is rather not like don't ever lie, but don't make decisions where you erase the possibility of positive sum deals.
His example was really fascinating. Have you read the post?
I'm sure I have, but I can't remember the example.
It's the one where he says a soldier is captured by the enemy, and the enemy asks, where is your headquarters located? And he can either tell them the truth or lie. And if he tells them the truth, they bomb the headquarters, they take out his leadership. Or he can lie, they bomb an empty warehouse. And then after that, they don't trust him anymore. They don't ask him. So instead of bombing just the headquarters, they're like, well, shit, we know that the headquarters is somewhere in the city. They just nuke the city to get rid of it. And then the prisoner of war is like, well, shit. I would have much rather that they just take out the HQ with the leadership than nuking the entire city. And Scott pointed out that if they assumed that the guy was just going to lie to them, they wouldn't have wasted their time or their resources. The fact that he might tell them the truth is why they asked. And if you commit to, I will lie when it is in my advantage, then they no longer, there's no longer that possibility for trade of information that even though I don't want my HQ to die, I want my whole city to exist much more. So I'm willing to make that trade even though it's kind of a shitty trade. And he's saying if you are committed to lie about that to protect your own side, then you're just going to get your city nuked instead.
Well, that's just a bigger version of the Kant
Yes.
dilemma, right?
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
I mean, I could see what they're saying. It could just as well be where they just have one bomb or some other ridiculous constraint on the problem where they only have one bomb and they're going to send it wherever you tell them to because they're idiots or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
I mean that's worth considering, but that's just what are the fallouts of lies, and then you're kind of responsible for those too. You're also responsible for the truth. So I mean, one thing that you might say in the situation is fuck off, right? I'm not going to tell you where they are,
But then they're going to nuke the city.
Right.
are they threatening you to? Are they making that explicit?
That's basically their choice.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, yeah. Well, in that case, yeah, then you just do the math, and do I want my squadron and my commanders dead, or do I want everybody I know and love dead? I mean, that's not hard either. I mean, that's obviously a hard decision to make, but that's not hard to sit here and make from our armchairs. Maybe I'm missing something.
Maybe you're hoping that if they hit the empty warehouse, that'll give your side a little bit more time to make a counterattack and take them out before they can go ahead and take out the city.
That's a fair point. I mean, certainly, once you start like picking at too many details, then you can find some way around it, right?
This scenario kind of implies that lying is a last resort weapon that you should only use if, you know, you're never going to be able to use that again. No one's ever going to trust you again. So save your lie up till the
until it really matters.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I'm working on. That's my long con, right? With being honest the last 5 years is then when it
10
does
years from now, you're going to rip off your face like, I'm an alien, motherfucker.
well, I mean, then
Time to feast.
and then when someone asks, you know, when you know, so like, I mean, that is one of the things, I guess, man, to make this just sound super, I talked about sociopathic self-interest before. It could be in your long-term sociopathic best interests to be a radically honest for the next few years, to have a really big lie to tell. Then everyone will believe it because you have this good reputation of being so honest.
Oh my God.
That's not what I'd advocate. I would advocate for doing it for other reasons.
Did I ever tell you what happened to me as a teenager?
No.
It was basically this.
Oh my God.
Although I kind of wasted it, I guess. Although not really. So, okay. I'm generally pretty shitty at lying. I'm not good at it. And basically everyone knows this about me. My parents know I'm crappy at lying. And so I don't try to do it very often. When I do, I'm usually caught and it sucks. But one time I called my sister a bitch. And that is a big deal in my house. And my sister went and told my parents. I think I was like 14 at this time. And my parents came up to me and were like, did you call your sister a bitch? And I was like, I'm going to die. I will not see the sun ever again. And I said, no, I wouldn't do that. That's horrible. With totally straight face. Like, this was the one time in my life I needed to lie. And having that reputation for being really shitty at lying saved me because I pulled it off entirely. Wow. It was crazy. And yeah. And looking back on it, that was a terrible time to waste it.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, they believed me, so I guess I didn't actually waste it.
That was the beginning of your deceptive period in your life,
yes,
right?
I suppose so. And it also feels weird because now I'm telling everybody, hey, even though I'm generally really shitty at lying, if it's really important to me, I can pull one over on you.
If you're a terrified 14-year-old, maybe.
Yeah.
There was a great Louis C.K. joke along the same lines where he's talking about when he had like two daughters, like, I don't know, 9 and 7 years old, and how the older one's just figuring out lying as a thing. Okay. And how it's like, how can I tell them not to do that when it's only a perfect solution to every problem they have right now? You know, so it's like, all right, so they're terrified and they can tell the truth and get in trouble, or they can just lie and I'll believe them and it'll be fine. So anyway, that brought that to mind.
And if they started practicing lying young, maybe they'd get better at it.
Oh God. That is not something you want.
But there's also, I think, in a post by Eliezer on Less Wrong, a comment, I think, he suggested that maybe lying to other people makes you better at lying to yourself, and then you're really screwed.
Yeah. I just recently read an article that said, God, what was I don't remember the details because I didn't really read it. I skimmed it. But it was along the lines of talking in euphemisms. Like you see in the Godfather movies, like, oh, it'd be terrible if an accident were to happen to your place of business. Maybe I can help protect it for $100. Talking in euphemisms rather than being direct makes it much easier for people to not only be dishonest and do morally bad things, but to not feel bad about it. Like, just using those words, even though you know what you're doing, you'll feel less bad. By dancing around it. So another good reason to just be direct and honest about things.
I can see that.
Really don't trust anyone who starts using euphemistic language for bad behavior.
Well, I mean, just don't trust anyone who uses euphemistic language in general, I guess.
I can think of a couple of examples. I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's hard to see how using euphemisms for things that aren't bad is going to have that effect.
Like, you don't always want to say penis. Every now and then you can say schlong. No.
I'm not called upon to talk about penises a lot in my daily life, so
you have the wrong job, sir.
I think I can think of a couple anecdotes that support Eliezer's post that people who practice lying can be better at dishonesty, and then the kind of reverse of that is that if you're committed to being honest, not just with other people, but with yourself, you can, I mean, so like, why is being dishonest to yourself bad? You know, so if you acknowledge that it is bad and that you'd rather not be dishonest to yourself, well, you can face that and you can solve it. You can approach that a lot quicker if you commit to being honest with yourself and with other people. All right. So there was a book that Sam Harris wrote that was really short, like 50 pages on lying. And he gave this anecdote where he was valedictorian of, I think it was a college or a high school or a college that he went to. And they wanted him to give the commencement speech or something. And he was like, oh no, I think somebody who's been to the school the full years, I think he transferred in, should do the speech instead. When really he was just terrified of public speaking. And so being called upon to face that with himself would have been an avenue to addressing that problem earlier in his life, right?
Right.
My own example was also academic, but it was like 6th grade. I went through an elementary school that was K through 6. And in 6th grade, I was going to the junior high school for math. And I ended up dropping out because I don't remember now looking back if I actually believed this myself or if I knew that I was lying. I think I must have known on some level that I wasn't being honest because I remember that it wasn't true, that I told people, no, I miss being back at my school with my friends and stuff. When really it was like, I'm struggling too much and this is stressful. And if I had said, no, look, I'm struggling, this is stressful, I might have been able to get like more assistance or something and, kept up with that math program. Yeah. But really I just told people, no, I have this other reason. It's not because it's too hard. It's I just don't want to anymore. And that let 6th grade Stephen back out of this math program. So I think those lies both came from Harris's example and mine came from being able to lie to other people about what I was actually thinking. Made it easier to lie to myself, which was Eliezer's point. And I think that I guess in my experience, there's good reason to believe that.
Yeah. And there's a really good reason to try to not lie to yourself as much as possible. That's
Agreed.
where you really screw your life over.
Well, I mean, like even think of like a really hard question. You see your friend and ask her, how'd you get that bruise on your face? And she, and the actual answer is that her spouse or her partner's hitting her, but she gives you some answer, that's obviously a lie. Well, the longer she can entertain that, the longer she doesn't have to face the reality that she's in an abusive relationship, right? So, I mean,
But I mean, she knows she's in an abusive relationship. The more insidious ones are the ones like you were saying, where you didn't realize that. I mean, I guess you kind of at some level realized that you were struggling.
But I was able to not make that my central focus. Yeah. This example is more just like being able to face a hard truth, right?
Yeah.
And that if you're committed to honesty, you're going to face it right now and right away. There's no putting it off. So, yeah, that's a different.
It's really hard to unflinchingly look at things that are difficult like that.
Yeah, for sure.
On the other hand, if you really unflinchingly look at the fact that you're willing to lie to other people, then you can also maybe tell the truth to yourself by recognizing that what you said to the other person is a lie, right?
Well played.
Not being taken in by your own lies.
Bringing it around and making it all meta and shit.
Admitting to yourself that you were lying.
Yeah.
So if you're being honest with yourself that you're being dishonest to other people, you're like, okay, well, I know when I'm being dishonest.
Yeah.
I'm being dishonest now. I'll be honest to myself when I want.
Yeah,
that
it
that could
requires
be
more
true.
mental energy, though.
Yeah. And I don't know of any.
And you may have the stress of knowing that you're lying. So.
Yeah, I think generally my thing about lying is that for the most part, it's unnecessary and you're causing unneeded stress. And, so the examples that people run to aren't really examples that people use in day-to-day life. And that's what I thought you were defending when we were talking about lying, a few months ago.
Well, I think as I recall that conversation, you were suggesting some kind of radical change in reality that might improve things. And one of the things you suggested was, what if people were just incapable of lying? And that seems to me like something terrible.
Terrible?
Like, first of all, you're unable to speak the words that you want to speak, even just because they're false.
Yeah, I remember the conversation now, or at least I remember that prompt. And that's right. I did say, so I can't remember what the specific prompt was, but I think we're talking about like what's one small change you could make that you think would make the world a better place. And I do think that there'd be some awkwardness to overcome in the first few days or first few weeks.
And as we kind of discussed, those high stakes situations where violence could happen are not that uncommon. They are definitely threats in people's lives.
But do you think if no one could lie, then there would be less of those threats? If someone asked a guy, how's your relationship doing? And his answer would have to be like, not that good. I beat my wife every week. Probably wouldn't happen as much with the beating of the wife, right?
So I mean, that could be one way to kind of beat this scenario. So yeah, the axe wielding psychopath might come to your house less often if that person was compelled to honesty for the last, for the entirety of his life. Because what are the odds he would still be out on the street? If that was his first break or whatever, and that's the first time he's going to do something crazy. But if he's been, violent his whole life and he's incapable of hiding that fact, I don't know. This is actually something that this isn't a fleshed out enough idea for me to get behind and defend all the way.
Like, I can't think of the benefits of lying that are so great that I wouldn't gladly make the world lie free. I admit there's definitely some benefits to it, but I think the costs of it are great enough that they really overwhelm it.
And just imagine like how much more relaxed everyone can be if they weren't having to read into everything everyone said. Yeah. And the fact that our government officials lie to us was like a fact of life, right? That just mentioned politics earlier, or like again our employers, our family, or whatever.
Well, people still have the ability to withhold information, and particularly people who are more powerful would have more ability to withhold information. And it would be the people with less power who would be put on the spot and be like forced to answer direct questions more often. And
often, but like you could still get like a government official, under if they're testifying and you ask them direct questions. If they say, I'd rather not answer that, you can just phrase the question and say, look, whatever government person, I'm going to ask you, have you been embezzling money? If a dodge is yes or no, so
that's not a fair question. Because you can't tell someone refusing to answer is admitting guilt.
I mean, I guess I'm thinking specifically like in a court, but I didn't mean to interrupt your analogy.
In a court, don't we have the Fifth Amendment?
I think we wouldn't need that. We do, but I've never been a Constitution worshiper, so if
in a court, all of a sudden these questions become even more likely to self-incriminate you, right?
Yeah, I mean, so again, this sounds like it's way more distant from what we're talking about, like actually, real life on the ground, how to live our lives. But in a world where people didn't lie, and you're asking, the president, did you, again, embezzle, whatever it is. And if they say, I'm not going to answer that, then you're like, oh, well, they would answer if the answer was no. And so I get like why you're not supposed to self-incriminate, but if it's impossible to not get called out by being dishonest, you couldn't make a career out of dishonesty.
You'd probably just implement a blanket policy of never answering questions.
Right. Then your answer to how's your day is like, I don't want to tell you. Yeah. That would just be your answer to everything.
Well, I mean, you could answer very simple ones like that, but anything dealing with anything legal, you'd be like, I don't answer questions about legalities. Sorry. Like a lot of people have the rule that I do not answer questions about what I make, or I do not answer questions about my sexuality. If a boss asks you, so are you gay? You're like, that's not an appropriate question for you to ask.
In this situation, I'm picturing if I could limit the power to lie, so maybe if we want to maintain lying for our personal lives for whatever reason, it would be kind of cool if it was like impossible to lie on the floor of the Senate.
Right.
Like where our representatives couldn't get up there and intentionally deceive each other or us, right? And I get how that has all kinds of implications that like, oh, you're saying they can't actually say what they want to say. You're compelling them to do things. I'm like, yeah, kind of. But I mean, these aren't average people with average powers, right? These are the last people on earth that you want deceiving people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just feel like the people, these people with greater power than average would be the least likely to ever be put on the spot in that situation. Like, if lying did not exist, maybe democracy would explode the next day.
Maybe.
Right?
Yeah. Although I think in the examples that I'm running out, like these are the people that exactly would be called out. So like if you ask them, I can't really think of any are these sexual assault allegations, do they have merit? And you can't lie about it. You want to know if your congressperson's a rapist. And so like I can see where like a power imbalance might make things tough when dealing.
I think we'd probably end up with a lot more Trumps.
I feel
one of the
with
weird
less.
things about Trump is that he's post-truth. I think no matter what he says, it doesn't matter. You're like, hey, he could be telling the truth, he could be lying. He doesn't even know. So
I disagree. I feel like it would be impossible for us to have gotten a Trump if a candidate or
because I don't think
it's like imagine like like when you're in court and you're like I swear on the Bible or you make an oath of truth. Yeah. Imagine if it became impossible for you to lie for the next hour.
Right, but so, I don't think Trump even lies all that much. He just randomly blurts out things that come into his head without evaluating their truth function at all or their truth value at all.
Given the definition that we used of trying to communicate a belief that you know to be false
Yeah.
to somebody, it's true that it's entirely possible that if the messenger of this is completely devoid of an internal monologue,
I mean,
there's nothing.
Who knows if he even believes in the concept of truth?
I was sort of making a joke, like if the lights aren't on, then there's nothing
Yeah.
like they're not convincing anything. You know, like if I have my computer print out random statements about different colors of the sky, it's not lying. It's just saying
In
stuff.
fact, you're really strongly incentivized to lie to yourself under this scheme.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, to deceive yourself so that you could never have to be lying to other people.
Maybe if you knew that's what you're doing. And again, this is not something that I want to spend a lot of time defending because it's not really a solid idea. I think we were entertaining it as a thought experiment, but it was. I certainly don't have a developed enough opinion on that to like sit here and talk about it, or to, I guess what I'm getting at is don't write in and how dumb that is, because I get that it's not the best idea, but it is fun to think about. I mean, yeah, if you could deceive yourself, I don't know. I guess it depends. You know, I couldn't convince myself if I wanted to that the sky was red, right? But that's sort of an aside. So,
Not with that attitude.
I did want to briefly go back to the discussion of not technically lying.
Okay.
And you mentioned how in Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality, Harry does this a lot.
Yeah. It
And-
should have been one of my early clues that he's evil.
That he's the true villain of the piece.
Well, or at least partly. Yeah.
So, actually, this comment back from 2009 by Eliezer seems to imply that he's not as much of a not technical liar as Harry, but he has some leanings towards that. It seems he writes that one of the primary motivations against lying is losing your reputation, like getting a reputation for lying. And then he says, at least if you get a reputation for not technically lying, your words still mean things, right?
Okay.
It's not like people are just going to completely discount everything you say because you lie a lot. Your words actually do still mean things if you technically don't lie. They just have to be carefully double checked.
Yeah, that's not someone with that reputation is not someone that I would find worthy of engaging in a conversation, because I don't want to have to sit there and analyze every single sentence for hours to see how it could have possibly been, twisted.
Well, on the other hand, if someone is writing to you and you have time to go over their words, that
It's still not worth it.
yeah.
No, I can see how it could be a reputation. It could be a cool reputation to have, as in like, oh, that guy's really smart. That is some clever, witty things he did with his lying. But still not someone I would want to engage with if I knew that was a thing they did often. I mean, I assume everyone lies from time to time, and I have not cut off all communication with the outside world. So
Yeah.
I accept some level of lying from people. But if it was a constant thing, it would be like talking to Loki or one of the trickster gods.
But there's
You can't
also
trust anything what
that's
they
a
say.
spectrum between explicit lying and complete non-deception, and in between that, like the level of not technically lying,
Yeah.
right? There are ways where you can sort of mislead people, but not that much, or at least not that egregiously.
I hope I'm not the only person right now thinking of the magic users from the Wheel of Time book series.
Never read it.
The Aes Sedai, that's the name of the magic users, and when they attain the position of being formal, whatever, they just call them whatever. It's this whole thing, but they take 3 oaths that they're bound to, like. You remember, like an unbreakable vow in Methods of Rationality. They're incapable of not doing it. So one of them is to never speak a word that isn't true.
Oh.
And so they're famously annoying to deal with, and everybody hates talking to them because they know that there's going to be this Aes Sedai trickery in their statements, that they're going to make me think something, but it's not really true, but it's technically true. And they all know that, the magic users, they know that they have this reputation and that they can, they have this forked Loki tongue. But what it does do is maintains, like you're saying, that if they say something direct, then it's true, because they can't lie. So like there's a difference obviously in that humans can, but it
I
does.
guess it is nice to have that ability to be taken completely seriously if you say something direct and unambiguous.
Yeah.
But having the general reputation of being incapable of having an honest conversation and dealing with, fairly isn't really worth it. Like, it's better to kind of have both, right? To not be dishonest for all intents and purposes and just be able to be trusted when you give a direct statement. But yeah, if you have to pick one, or if you can have one, then go for it. Is that sort of what he's saying and what you would get behind? Or I feel like I'm talking.
Yeah,
The way I've got my microphone is I'm facing towards Inyash more, so I'm not looking at. So I've tried to adjust because I'm not looking at Shelly that much, and I feel like I'm not engaging you enough.
No, that's cool. I think he's just saying, like, generally try to not lie, but if you have to be deceptive, try to maybe not technically lie and downgrade your deception.
Try to be clever about it.
Yeah. And that the cost of one is definitely less than the cost of the other, because one is like almost a nuclear option if you're going to get a reputation for lying.
Right.
But also, I want
That's a good
to
point.
talk about two other posts by Eliezer. Ends don't justify means among humans,
that's a good one.
and protected from myself, which I think is maybe right next to it in the sequence.
Okay.
So the first one talks about how, as humans, we are running on corrupted hardware. And so our judgments can't really be trusted. And in the most high stakes and fuzzy, hard to judge situations, you want to have some kind of hard rule that you always follow, even if it seems to you like it's the wrong rule in that case. Because you're running on corrupted hardware, you're probably going to get it wrong.
Should we quickly define corrupted hardware? What is meant by that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Me, all right, personally. All right. The concept that so it kind of draws a distinction between the mind as being more like software and the body as like the computer, the hardware that our mind is run on. And if you know you are dealing with a computer that has been, the hardware itself has been corrupted, someone hostile to you has access to it, you can't really trust any software that runs on it, because no matter how good the software is and how well you've checked it, there could be something in the hardware where whenever you add these two bits together, it'll spit out a 3 instead of a 2. There's just no way to get around it. And so if you have to make allowances for knowing that you are dealing with a piece of hardware that has been corrupted, that it can be wrong in ways that it is impossible to tell what those ways are. And that's kind of what he means, that your body can hijack your thought process in ways that are invisible to you and that will look like you are running correctly, even though you are not. And there's no way for you to tell. And the only way to avoid this is by having some very hard rules that you will never, ever break, even when it is obvious that you have to break the rule right now. I think this is kind of where Kant comes from, that he has this rule, never, ever lie, even if it looks like in this one case I should lie, because really there's no reason to let an axe murderer know that my friend is in the basement. His argument would be like, that is your hardware. It has been corrupted. It is lying to you. Stick with the rule. I would assume is what Kant would say if he was around nowadays and a computer programmer.
Well, certainly you can maybe see the seeds of that kind of thinking in Kant.
His Eliezer's example was that it always feels like you need to overthrow the current leadership of the tribe for the good of the tribe, because you will all be wiped out if you keep going down this ruinous path. And then somehow, once you're the leader, it seems like, why shouldn't I give special favors to my friends? They supported me in this fight, and it's okay for me to take a few extra riches from the pool because look at how much I have sacrificed for the good. And so he's saying that is your hardware, basically saying you are not in the most advantageous position in society. Kill the people who are, take their stuff, and now spread your genes.
Yeah.
So thus the rule, never, ever kill the leadership and take control of the tribe, even for the good of the tribe.
Yeah, because you will trick yourself into thinking you're being altruistic when probably your programming, evolution programmed you to have other truer motivations.
Which is one of the reasons that we say do not punch fascists if they're just talking to a reporter on the street, right?
Small nitpick with the example.
Yeah.
Never kill the tribe leader and take ownership of the tribe yourself, because you're.
Unless he's Hitler.
Well, I'm wondering, what if you're just killing the tribe leader because you think that the tribe leader is going to ruin your civilization? And you're not saying I'm going to
That
make a
is
power grab.
literally what he's saying.
He's saying don't make a power grab for yourself afterwards as well, because that has all those obviously evolutionary
Well, no,
psychology.
I mean, once you're the leader, you get all sorts of evolutionary advantages.
Well, no, I'm saying don't be a leader. If you're just saying, look, I don't even
just
want
kill the
pow-
leader and then leave.
Well, or like, just so this doesn't make it sound like we're talking about contemporary politics, Harry in Method of Rationality talks about putting Hermione in charge of the government that he overthrows because he doesn't want to do it because he doesn't trust himself. But I'll put Hermione in charge because she's like the most good person out there. So that's not the same thing. That seems like you're taking cover for the idea that, yes, I know that I'm not equipped, that if I want to overthrow the government, I probably shouldn't be running it, but I'll put this really nice person in charge.
Yeah, that may be a good compromise.
Just checking to see if there's any wiggle room there.
Yeah, I think
Just out of
I
curiosity.
think there's some wiggle, especially since like the injunction isn't really don't kill the leader; it's don't kill people.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm on board with that, by the way. Yeah.
Right.
I realized that I made it sound like I was talking about politics, and I was really just looking to nitpick that example.
So we're all on board with not killing people.
Definitely.
I guarantee you'll both survive this podcast.
Now I'm actually worried.
Now I never want to stop recording.
Because everything I say is a lie.
Oh no, I was going to say 'cause we're guaranteed to survive the podcast, and then I'm like, oh
We
well.
do- well,
if
no,
never-
we're not, but we're guaranteed to have some evidence left over if we keep recording.
Very well.
There was another thing that I looked up. Some
Oh, did you want to? What was the second one? Protected from myself?
Oh.
Or was that the same?
it was kind of along the same lines, but Eliezer did talk about 3 reasons why his injunction against lying has protected him from himself.
Ooh, nice.
Number 1, the honest way often has a simplicity that transgressions lack. That I think that's one of the ones that we teach to children about why they shouldn't lie. 2, he was stricter with himself and held himself to a higher standard when he was doing various things that he considered himself ethically obligated to do. So just like the feeling of obligation and of like ethical rightness was maybe held him to a higher standard than the idea that this is going to be practical. And 3, the wisdom of history suggests that the constraints that help you to avoid hurting other people may also stop you from hurting yourself. So that's just kind of like a general trend, I guess he's noticing in history, that people do certain things to be nice to others, and it ends up working out well for themselves in general.
Seems like a rule about human life in general. I don't. Maybe I'm coming from a very privileged position, but it seems to me that like people who are nicer to other people tend to have better lives.
Well, I think that our society's evolved in such a way as to make altruism beneficial. Like we treat people who seem altruistic better.
Yeah.
I also sort of just wonder about people who, are dishonest and, overly self-interested. There's the real question to ask, like, are they as happy as people who aren't like that? Mm-hmm. And there's all kinds of different ways to ask that question and to analyze different answers. But it's at least conceivable that that people, I guess you could just say bad people, they might have all the money and all the nice cars or whatever, but are they really as happy as other people?
Yeah.
Especially like if you have a reputation as a liar and everybody around that, knows that you'll lie when it's convenient for you, you can never really forge a real relationship with somebody because they'll never be able to be reasonably confident that you're being honest with them.
And I don't think it's just the reputation thing. Having met a couple people like this in my life, it seems like they're unhappy and it's their own damn fault, and there's no way they can be happy because they think that everyone else is like this too. There is no one they can trust, and it's kind of sad.
Agreed. I don't know. I'm not even sure if you'd have to go as far as to typical mind your own, dishonesty to be unhappy, but certainly that would lead to unhappiness. Not only if everyone knows that they can't trust you to be honest with them, but if you don't believe that they'll be honest with you, then yeah, that makes the very valuable part of human life of like having connections with people impossible.
I agree with that. I would also emphasize the fact that it is specific to human psychology. Like you can imagine some non-human mind that wouldn't have this problem.
Oh, sure.
But
I am talking about us.
yeah.
Yeah.
I did want to talk about animals also. animals do engage in deceptive behavior. Both deceiving and detecting deception are things that have evolved kind of in a sort of an arms race against each other, right?
Neat.
And this particular study from 2001 gave a bunch of anecdotes about animals doing things that seem to be designed to deceive.
Well, you can't just say that and not give us an anecdote.
There's one about hyenas. These were captive hyenas, I believe, or at least in such a situation where the researchers could introduce stimuli and see how they're going to respond. So the researchers put a piece of meat in a particular place before the hyenas got there. And I guess the hyenas probably expected this kind of thing to happen for now and then. So only one of them arrived on the scene initially, saw the meat, took it over to the pond, and dunked it under the water and sat on it. And then the other ones came along.
Nice.
So this initial guy, he's acting like, though there's never any meat, and probably you would think that was a deliberate deception, right? Like,
Yeah.
he doesn't want them to know. He's trying to make them think that there's no meat. But
What a jerk. No wonder hyenas get such a bad reputation.
but the other hyenas seem to expect that there should have been something. Maybe they smelled it, or they just are used to the researchers putting stuff out there for them, or for some reason. So they go on a search, and they find it under the water, and they take it away from him and make sure to punish him by not letting him eat any of it at all, while the rest of them got to eat it.
So even so ethically questionable hyenas have a standard to punish defectors when
Yeah.
they're being
Indeed.
dishonest. I couldn't cite this, but I did hear on a podcast recently that apparently, like a lot of the birds that we think mate for life, you can test the DNA of the offspring, and it turns out there's tons of infidelity.
Yeah.
But it's great, for your genetic fitness, for you to find a better mate. But if that mate won't roost with you, then you find one that will. And this sounds like a metaphor for life. But that seems like another example where, with birds, I'm less convinced that there's something that it's like they're planning this out in the way the hyena did. But there might be, something. I'm wondering what's going through their heads, but there doesn't really have to be anything going through their heads to make this happen.
Yeah.
But with the hyena, with that level of deception, it sounds like they definitely were thinking, those ones are on their way. I need to do something about this. So like it sounds like, oh, there's a body of water nearby.
Yeah.
So like it sounds like there was some thinking that went into that.
Yeah.
Do you have any other examples? That sounds like fun.
Well, there's some examples with chimps, but those you kind of would expect chimps to be closer to humans in their ability to model other people's minds and stuff, right? That's not that surprising.
No, well, I guess not. It's still interesting though. Like, I don't think of animals as deceptive at all. Like, Steven, are you with me on this?
No.
No.
I mean, it depends if you ever, my parents have two dogs, and I guess they both kind of do regular dog stuff, but one blames the other for making a mess. And like you can tell, like you might have been with the other one the whole time.
Yeah.
But like you've seen like gifs online or something of the ruined trash cans all knocked over, and then a dog just like laying, not like making deliberate like rigidness not to make eye contact with you because it knows that it's in trouble. But you can see other ones where they all listen to implicate the other animal or something. I'm sure I've seen one where a cat blamed a dog for something. I'll see if I can pull up a gif.
How does one animal blame another animal?
I feel like maybe it dragged something into another room or something. I might have to wait for one of these to come up organically. I wouldn't even know what to search for. But yeah, I think that they can like, nope, he did it.
Maybe I just have a naive, idyllic view of nature.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, animals are wonderful. Why would they lie to anyone?
I wish I could think of a specific example, but I'm pretty sure I've seen them. I'll see if I can find one.
But yeah, so if these abilities evolved, they certainly do have some kind of perhaps limited usefulness.
Well, I think there's a difference between useful and commendable, though.
Yeah.
Like, it can be useful to beat someone to death, but I don't think it's a good thing to do.
I agree. Like it's begging like a naturalistic fallacy. I mean, I bet deceivers and perfect psychopaths did very well evolutionarily, right? Like if you got away your entire life and had this web of lies crafted to where, you died a hero, but in reality you were some monster.
Yeah.
That that could work out well for you and for your evolutionary fitness. But that's certainly not the kind of thing we would want to foster right now, right?
Maybe it's worth mentioning that when you're closer to someone, you're actually less able to tell when they're lying than when you're not close to them.
Really?
Yeah.
That is very worth mentioning.
And very disheartening.
Yeah, Steven's been lying to me this whole time.
When you were beginning that sentence, I could feel my heart warming. Like, oh, you're going to say the closer you are, the harder it is for someone to lie to you. But no, the harder it is for you to detect dishonesty.
Is it because
That
they
sucks.
know you better so they can lie to you better, or what?
Maybe, I'm not sure. And it's only one study that I read about. And so whether it's a good study or not, whether it replicates or not, I don't know.
That's a bummer.
That is a bummer. So the lesson is do not trust the ones you love. The more you love someone, the less you can trust them.
The real lesson is don't take life lessons from Inyash.
It's probably Halo effect. Maybe I would guess that something like that is going on.
Sure.
Sure, you could be blinded by how much you love them.
Yeah, I wouldn't love them this much if they were liars, and therefore, they kind of just get that reverse causality in your brain.
Yeah.
Do you practice any general lying that you do now? I mean, you don't have to obviously. I guess.
So what is it that you've
hold
never
on.
told us?
I'm always completely honest.
Hold on. So I mean, I will. I can't. I don't think I've been pulled over in the last few years, but I use that example. Like if I did have drugs in the car and they asked me, I would say no.
Well, that's just
But-
common sense.
Well, but I mean, it is common sense, but I'm coming from a position of advocating radical honesty, right? So,
Right, well, I mean, it's
but I do
tough
acknowledge
when
that in
you-
that circumstance.
It's tough when you have moral objections to the laws. I got pulled into a whole thing where I thought this law is bullshit, so fine, whatever. I don't care. I can lie about it, and it still kind of sucks. But what are you supposed to do? Help enforce a law that you have moral objections to?
Right. Or, go to jail for decades for something that you believe you didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
So, I mean, all right, let me think of a different example just to end this on a fun day-to-day life. Your partner asks, does this outfit make me look fat? Or does it, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Do you say, of course not? Like you're supposed to? Or are you honest with them?
Every now and then you get asked questions like, how do you like my new haircut? And this has happened to me not too long ago. And I'm like, you know what? The haircut's not my favorite, but I still like you. So it doesn't matter what your haircut is. You could shave yourself bald. I still like you. Perhaps not quite as much physically, but still, I'm not going to dump you or anything.
I guess I don't get asked that often, but usually I will just say what I think.
What do you do?
I mean, I don't get asked that real question that often. I think, honestly, so one thing
But
that
you must have been asked a question not too long ago by someone you really liked that you were reluctant to answer because you thought it would hurt them.
I must have been.
Sure. Everyone has to get that at least once a year, right?
And also, pro-social lies are the most common lies that people report on surveys.
Yeah, where your white, happy white lies.
Yeah,
I love the gift you got me.
kind
or whatever.
lies, yeah.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, so those are kind of the ones I wish we spent more time talking about. Everyone knows somebody who has a bunch of horse stuff, right? Like horse bed sheets, horse posters, horse figurines, because their family members at some point heard that they like horses, and then they get them that all the time. And because you have to be like, oh, I love it. You can't say, apparently, to many people feel like they can't say, I'm getting sick of horse stuff. I'd love anything else.
Yeah.
And so they end up with all tons of horse crap, right? Calendars, whatever. And so I think being able to face a pro-social lie, again, you don't have to be a dick, but you can say, hey, do you like this thing? Oh, well, I don't think it's for me. If you have, I mean, depending on your relationship with the person, you could say, if you have a gift receipt, you should definitely return this. If you don't, maybe you'd like it back to give to somebody who might like it more, or whatever. But I mean, there are circumstances, whatever.
Those are so hard to do.
They are, but I do find, so you mentioned, what do I say when someone asks me if they look fat in this dress? I don't get asked that particular question a lot, but I do have people reach out to me once in a while and say, look, I'm calling you because I know that you'll be honest with me. And they'll start the conversation like that. And I find that rewarding.
Yeah.
And then they know that I have a reputation, at least with them, for not telling them just what they want to hear.
Did you ever watch American Idol?
No.
Okay. American Idol had 3 judges. People would come in and sing, and then the judges would rate them on the singing, basically. Eventually, later on, it was voting for across America. But the interesting part was with the judges.
I'm familiar with the premise. I did live in the United States.
Okay, great. And there would always be the 3 judges. I for the first few seasons were Simon Cowell, Paula Abdul, and God, what was the other guy? Randy. And the person whose opinion you respect is Simon. Because when you go up there and sing, Paula will always say, that was fantastic. You were great. I loved it. And Randy will always be like, yeah, at worst he'll say like, that was all right. Could use some work. But and sometimes he'll say that's great, but he'll never say that was bad. Simon will be like, fuck you. That was awful. You hurt my ears. Get out of this room. And he will do that all the time. And so whenever like I would seek approval from someone, it would always be the Simon Cowell types. Like, I know you're going to tell me it's good, whether it's good or not, so I don't care about your opinion. The guy who tells you suck, he's the person that I actually want to hear that was fantastic from, because that means he actually thought it was fantastic.
Right. And so I bet when you're searching proofreaders for the stuff you write,
yes,
you want somebody who has a reputation of being really critical.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's because their words carry more weight.
Right.
And I think that's one of the benefits of not...
But also I think Simon wasn't honest. He exaggerated his negativity.
He probably did. It was more entertaining.
Didn't he have like, I don't watch American Idol. I don't watch singing shows, but I watch cooking shows.
Okay.
Didn't he have that, although I don't watch a lot of this guy. Who's that mean chef, Hell's Kitchen?
Yeah.
I know who you're talking about.
Gordon Ramsay.
Yeah.
Isn't he like the Gordon Ramsay of the music industry? Isn't Simon?
I don't know. I've never seen any Gordon Ramsay, but he was famous for being an asshole.
Right.
That was
so
his shtick.
At some level, he flanderized himself and got caught up in it. But I think that, the general point of what you're making, I think, stands, right?
That if you're going to be dishonest in the negative direction.
Just have no friends at all. Fair enough. No, I think the real point is that when you have a reputation for honesty, people your words carry more weight than they would otherwise. Like if you're going to say nice things no matter what, then then people who want the truth aren't going to bother asking you.
Right.
So, if I'm not sure if there's anybody, that, some people's parents will always praise their decisions no matter what. I'm going to drop out of school and go, be a drum circle hippie. Oh, well, that's great, sweetheart. Like, you don't want that person's feedback. You want your honest, smart friends' feedback about how dumb of an idea that is.
Isn't that always the comedian's joke? Whenever a comedian delivers a line that just bombs and one person in the audience laughs, he's like, thanks, Mom.
I hadn't heard that, but that's awesome.
Should we go hopefully real quick to listener feedback?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great.
All right.
So, Matthew Cutler wrote us. Since this is not public. We got an email from M. He says, they say, in episode 9, you started going through the arguments people use against polyamory. The first argument against polyamory that you brought up was said to be an argument against polygamy rather than polyamory. To my mind, that and some of the subsequent arguments were actually arguments against polygyny, and by extension, polyandry, rather than against polygamy or polyamory. I was surprised to hear those arguments used against polygamy, which in my mind simply refers to a person being married to more than one person, regardless of the genders involved. The glossary on more than two backs up this gender-neutral definition. I'd previously been thinking that one of the goals of some polyamorous people would probably be to legalize polyamorous marriages, and that would be referred to as legalizing polygamy. I had expected that there would be a desire among some polyamorous people to reclaim the term polygamy to simply hold the gender-neutral definition, despite historical misuse of the term as a synonym for polygyny. A quick search did bring up a few apparent examples of such suggestions. What do you think about the idea of reclaiming the term polygamy? And I want your opinion on this as well. Would you like to start, or should I start?
You go ahead.
Okay, well, my personal opinion is that the word polygamy is so loaded with bad history that it's an unreclaimable. And people think of polygamy, they think of people, old men marrying 14-year-old girls and arranged marriages and just all sorts of horrific abuses. And I do not want that associated anyway with me. And yes, I mean, maybe technically that's not necessarily what it entails. But once you've loaded a word so much, you just... it's not worth the effort it would take to reclaim it. I think singularity has had a similar sort of thing where it once meant something and nowadays just means this crazy thing that sometimes people talk about as a rapture of the nerds sort of thing. And it's not worth going through the effort of trying to say, no, this is what we really mean by it. It's like, okay, fine, use a different word. And I think we have a perfectly good word. We have polyamorous, which is what everyone uses now, and it doesn't have all that baggage and kind of has a whole core of good people fighting for it. And so calling it a polyamorous marriage, I think, would be great and doesn't come with all that weight of history on it.
Well, I think there's a way that could be confusing because I am in a polyamorous marriage, but I'm not married to more than one person.
Right, because you can't be legally.
Right. If you could be, though, the term polyamorous marriage would still not necessarily imply that being married to more than one person.
Right. No, it's not supposed to imply being married to only one, right?
So that's why polygamy would be a different term than it would have a different meaning.
I see, because you're saying a polyamorous marriage could be, right, a marriage that we have nowadays between just two people where they're both polyamorous. Mm-hmm. Okay. Whereas an actual polygamous marriage would be a legal marriage between three or more people.
Or maybe not a legal marriage, some kind of marriage.
Okay.
But yeah. So I'm just saying that the word polygamy does have added meaning that is not encapsulated by polyamorous marriage.
I see what you're saying. In those cases, though, I would prefer a term like triad marriage. Those are often used, or anything really other than the word polygamy, just because of the baggage that comes with it. Do you disagree?
I mean, I like the idea of coming up with more terms, not the one you suggested, but
Okay.
yeah. As for whether the word polygamy is reclaimable or not, I'm not as sure as you are that it's not, but yeah, I think it might not be.
I mean, I guess any word is eventually possibly reclaimable, but it just seems not worth the effort. Mm. Are we really gaining that much from having a technically correct definition?
Perhaps not. And my take on polygamy for polyamorous people is more that, at least when it comes to legal marriage, maybe abolishing it was a better choice than creating polygamous options.
I completely agree with you. But there's always going to be people who want marriage, I guess.
I mean, I am legally married, and it does come with legal benefits, and it also comes with privileges that, in like ways in which people who are not legally married are unfairly discriminated against. Mm-hmm. So I think the ultimate ideal solution would be if the government got out of the marriage business.
So I personally have been wanting to do a marriages are horrible and should not be a thing episode. Would you be interested in joining me for this?
Gosh. I'm not a lawyer, so I can't talk that much about...
I'm not a lawyer either. It doesn't stop me from running my mouth.
And there are lots of aspects of marriage besides the legal that I value. Okay. So I don't know if you're against all of them.
This is what we could have a whole hour-long episode about, right?
I guess, yeah.
I could do my best to defend marriage. I'm not sure if I'm a defender of marriage or not, but I assume, guessing from how passionate you sound against it, that I might be slightly, maybe apathy is the right word, like me with most things.
Yeah.
I can weigh in as somebody who's not in the community of polyamory as far as what I think.
Just please do.
My at a glance perception would be that reclaiming that word would probably be more trouble, like probably be really difficult. Mm-hmm. And that, just from people who don't run in these circles, polygamy has this, you imagine somebody married to, a bunch of children kind of thing, right? And that's
basically whenever you hear about it in the news, that's what you hear, right?
Right. So, I mean, trying to rebrand it sounds like trouble, or sounds like at least a lot of work. And I wonder if it's worth it, given that there's another word for it. Like it's interesting. I'm not sure if atheism or atheist is like as scorned a word or position as it used to be, but there was a time, I don't know, in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, to try and change the word to brights.
I remember that. Yes.
And it never really took off. I think
it's a stupid word.
Well, that might have been part of it, right? Because then it has an implication that people who aren't brights are dims, and that's not very cool. But then it did just sort of work out where, turns out that, at least in my perspective, my social circles, all of them, no one really hates the word atheist. So, although, I don't know.
People basically default to agnostic. Agnostic is what you say when you're an atheist, but you don't want to...
use that word.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want the baggage that comes around with the atheist.
I actually had somebody for the first time in years ask me like, are you an atheist? And I didn't know them that well. This was the first night I met this person. And I was like, well, because I didn't want to go with all that baggage. So what I said was, I remain unconvinced of the truth claims of religion. And that sounds like a fairly innocuous way of putting it, because atheist does have baggage, right? Yeah. And so I don't know. I don't necessarily. I'm kind of like in the Neil deGrasse Tyson camp on this. There's a great episode of Rationally Speaking where that's Julia Galef's podcast back when she was still doing it with Massimo Pigliucci, where he came on. He actually requested to be on. And he's like, I never talk about religion stuff, but you two are sane. I want to get your guys' feedback on this. And because he didn't like the word atheist and he didn't like identifying as one. And I could sort of see where he's coming from.
And was it because of the cultural baggage that he wanted to avoid?
Yeah, basically, you know, kind of like if somebody comes up to you and says, oh, I'm a feminist, I'm an atheist or whatever, the implication is that someone will say, oh, you believe all these things. Right. And it's like, oh no, I don't believe any of those things. This is what I believe. But by putting yourself under an ist banner, you open the door kind of deliberately for people to assign beliefs to you. Yeah. Rather than for
if you open up identifying as a Democrat, people are going to think a whole bunch of things about you, which may not necessarily be true, but that's what you get for using that word, right?
Yeah, so I think that's what he'd like to avoid.
Yeah.
And so again, having known this person for like 2 hours, I'm like, I had no idea whether they were religious or not or where this was going. Turns out they would identify as atheist as well. Cool. But I was like, I wonder why they're asking this. So I'm going to think about my answer for a second, because I mean, this is kind of an amicable evening. I don't want to get into like an argument with somebody. But yeah, I don't know if I dislike the word. I do like the idea of, so Neil deGrasse Tyson says, the only ist I am is a scientist. And that's cute and quippy and it works for him. But I mean, I also like to say I'm an aspiring rationalist, and that ends in ist too. And that has some connotations. So like, I think.
But those are connotations you're mostly okay with embracing.
And also I think that's a little bit, he's a little bit dodging some things by saying that, because there are other categories which don't have the letters IST at the end, which I'm pretty sure he does claim for himself, but he can get off the hook because it doesn't have ist in it.
Can you think of an example?
Well, like, so I'm not entirely sure about this one, but I thought I saw him wearing a wedding ring. And
yeah, he's married.
And so that's a social category that people wear as a badge on themselves.
Yeah.
And
you'd almost call him a monogamist.
Oh shit!
Well, no, we don't know that he is monogamous just because he wears a wedding ring.
That's true.
But he's one of those, right?
And I could be thinking of someone else that I saw the ring on. Like I know that he's married, but I don't know if he wears the ring. But anyway,
I think he does. But yeah, I mean that's fair, and I think I'm not sure what his position on that would be, but I feel like there's probably less baggage associated with that he'd be uncomfortable identifying with, or at least that most people would be, assuming that they're, okay portraying themselves as a married person, but not necessarily.
Right. So then like he's okay with the implications of certain things, but he's going to say like the only one that I claim is a scientist, but there are definitely other ones that he claims maybe more subtly, or,
maybe the only one who wants explicitly labeled to him. And I don't know enough about his position exactly to defend it, but I could imagine saying something like, the only one I'm going to call myself is this, and the only one I'm going to answer to is scientist. So I can see that, but what was I going to say? Oh yeah, but I also feel like maybe monogamist for some hypothetical person, probably Neil deGrasse Tyson, probably carries less distasteful baggage than atheist for him and for people that he interacts with. So that might be something like that. So to bring this back to the commenter's question, I feel like trying to save polygamy sounds like a whole bag of worms or can of worms. Do you store worms in cans or bags? A whole Tupperware container full of worms, and it almost seems like, what's the point? And then two, since there are active polygamists of the kind that no one likes, if you rescued the word for a position or a societal standpoint that you favor, you would also be saving it for the people that you don't like. Yeah. So did they cover that at all? Because that sounds like an obvious implication that is worth considering.
That was I didn't think of that either. So props to you, man. That was an awesome point.
Well,
but maybe that could be helpful, because if you make that word strip the baggage and make it just purely its denotation and none of the connotations. Then you are kind of incentivizing people, including yourself, to come up with a word that is specific to those people who, like forced marriage people, maybe I would say, like people who use marriage and forced marriage to to repress young people. I don't know. You would have to define it. It would be almost like rationalist taboo, where you would say, like, we're not going to use polygamy with all these connotations anymore. So now we have to come up with the real word for what those people are doing.
Right.
And I'd be more in favor of that, but that sounds like a different challenge than trying to save the word polygamy, right? Because then if say you wanted to save polygamy for people who are in tight polyamorous relationships, however, if they wanted to define themselves, as like, yes, I'm married to 3 people, therefore I'm polygamous. Well, then to anybody who all they knew about you was that you're polygamous, they'd be like, oh my God, you had 4 12-year-olds married to you when you were 35 or whatever, right? So, I mean, it would be funny if it wasn't so horrifying.
Yeah,
but
I really do wish people would not do that with words. Just assign all sorts of things to them that they don't necessarily mean, and then use it as a catch-all way to club someone.
You're describing the problem with words. Like, I mean, no, this is the problem with words in general, right?
Yeah.
Like, and that's the whole point. Like, polygamy or polyamory is just a few syllables, and it contains a very long message. Mm-hmm. But the point is like, hey, if we can get everyone to agree on the message, then we can save ourselves, 30 seconds every time we use the word. Yeah. So I mean,
but then you end up fighting about word definitions.
Yeah,
which is a pain in the ass. Like the fighting about the word feminist, which used to be only basically a good thing, and anyone who was anti-feminist was, you could tell right away, an asshole. And it encompasses other things than it used to now, and now it's a pain in the ass. You can't use the word feminist necessarily as an unreserved good anymore.
Well, that's why I use that example. Like Scott Alexander from Slate Star Codex. I'm not sure if this is still true, but I know as of a few years ago, he explicitly didn't identify as feminist.
Yes, because he'd had some very bad experiences.
Right, and some of the connotations. And he's like, no, of course I'm for equality, which some people would be like, well, that's all feminism is. And he's like, well, that's not my experience. Yeah. So they're arguing about, what this ist means. Yeah. And that's exactly the conversation that people like him and Neil deGrasse Tyson want to avoid. They're just like, ask me what I believe. Don't make me give you a few syllables and then you give me all my beliefs.
But if you can load up a word with enough negative connotations, you can then use that word to club people, even if it doesn't necessarily apply to them.
Yes. I guess that's one of the problems of identifying under a banner, right?
Right.
So I know that there's been some dragging of the rationalist community through the mud by some writers in the last few weeks. I don't have anything in front of me, but I can find stuff pretty quick. Okay. Some tweets, some short articles about basically like all the straw men.
Okay.
But they were like, that's all the shit that these crazy people are all about. And, look at how weird Ellie Iser is occasionally. So they all think this is, a great thing. So they're doing kind of what people will do, be like, oh, this person's atheist, therefore they're like an amoral baby eating Satan worshiper, right?
Exactly.
So, I mean, you can drag stuff through the mud if you...
Which is really annoying because you load up atheist with all the things, immoral, doesn't believe in laws, eats babies, and then you ask someone, do you believe in God? And they're like, no. And they're like, see, atheist! But there's nothing wrong with not believing in God. And but a person who doesn't believe in God is an atheist, right? And you're like, yeah. So you eat babies, kill him. And
yeah, it gets weird pretty quick.
Like the worst argument in the world.
Yes.
Like that article.
It basically is exactly that.
What is this? The worst argument in the world? I think I need to read this.
It's actually kind of basically what we just said, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's loading up a word with a whole bunch of negative connotations and then using its strict technical definition to tar a bunch of people.
Oh, that's a Slate Star Codex.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'm familiar. Okay. I thought it was some older philosophy thing that... No, okay, I'm wrong the
I
post
feel
now.
like he originally posted it on Less Wrong. Is it this art?
I will be Googling later. Yeah. That sounds like fun.
But yeah.
Okay, so that is our perspectives on your question.
Cool.
Did anyone else have anything else you wanted to add about that?
I had one real quick one. We had somebody write in, apparently in the digital rights and privacy episode, I mentioned the ad blocker I use, and I said it too fast, which is completely reasonable because I talk really fast. I use uBlock Origin, which is an open source ad block software that I really like. I think apparently AdBlock started letting ads in from people who paid them enough. I heard something about this.
Jesus.
Don't quote me on that, but I heard that. Well, I mean, that's the thing too, is if it's not open source, you don't know exactly what they're doing. So uBlock Origin is open source, and it's for, I know, at least Chrome, probably other browsers as well. So
I will
one
be
quick Google
switching.
away. Do we have any other feedback?
I do not know.
I think that's it then. I mean, we've got some good conversations at the subreddit. Nothing I really want to paraphrase.
We will quickly say you can comment at our website, thebayesianconspiracy.com, or at the subreddit / the Bayesian Conspiracy. Yes, you can write us an email. We often appreciate if you give reviews on iTunes, because that helps people know that we exist, and that makes us very happy. And it makes us even more happy if you support us on Patreon for $1 per episode, or however much you want to give. And also, while we're on the topic, mad props to our sound engineer, Kyle Moore, who does a lot of work for us every week and makes us sound good. We love him.
I made a short list of all the things to say in the last minute, and you just hit all of them. Thank you for your support, everyone who's currently supporting us on Patreon.
You are the best.
Like Ines mentioned, don't hesitate to leave a review at iTunes if you want. The last thing I will say as far as feedback, I think the last 2 sections have been dominated by us responding to one person about sort of... or maybe you guys not the last 2. In the last couple of months, because these episodes aren't coming out in the order that we're recording them in. How do we want to put this? We spend a lot of time engaging one person who I think most of us find pretty objectionable, and I wanted to just kind of put out there that won't become a long-term trend. It was basically, since this person's engaging in good faith, I wanted to respond in good faith, but it was sucking up a lot of airtime, and I think it's not really, doesn't behoove us to really spend that much time on the air giving voice to some of these opinions. So if you got sick of those, we did too. So don't worry, they're mostly gone. I can't promise that we'll never ever talk to any of these people again, but we won't be spending 45 minutes dissecting some really nasty emails. So anyway, thanks, and I think that's our episode.
Yeah. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Shelley. This was awesome.
Thanks.
All right, cool. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.